Okay, good afternoon. We are going to reconvene the bonding subcommittee meeting. We thank you all very much who waited patiently. Next on our agenda is, I apologize, Bree, you ready? Okay, great. The next agency on our agenda is the Department of Economic and Community Development. Commissioner, if you and your team can come on up, that would be great.
The team part is mostly on Zoom, so I'm sorry you've just got me this afternoon, but I'm
okay.
Thrilled to be here. So should I get started? Are you ready?
Please do.
Okay,
Sorry.
good. Well, good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Dom, Commissioner for Economic and Community Development. As I mentioned, have many members of the team on Zoom for questions as we get to it later. And also wanted to mention at the outset, we have Dr. Valieres, who runs the Office of Workforce Strategy, since we have a lot of those items mixed in with the DECD items. We also have Jenny Ray Clay, the Executive Director of the Social Equity Council, for the questions related to social equity. So with that, I will touch briefly upon the DECD initiatives that are covered today. And I'm excited because we're talking about 3 of our hallmark programs at DECD, and I'll run through them quickly. First one is our Brownfield Remediation Revitalization Program. This is a program that is probably familiar to many of you. It has touched municipalities all over the state. It's a program that invests in remediating contaminated properties and putting them back into active use. These can go on to be housing, offices, restaurants, manufacturing spots, and to see them go from basically dirty fields to all of those exciting end uses is one of our, you can see why it's one of our hallmark programs. And in terms of ROI, it's very strong, with bringing about $14 of outside investment into the state for every $1 that is spent on brownfield remediation. The second program that we'll discuss today is the Small Business Boost Program. This is a fund for loans to small businesses at low interest rates that are intended to really help businesses gain access to capital that might not otherwise gain access to capital. There's a real emphasis with this program on minority businesses and on women and veteran-owned businesses. So this is a key program as well for making sure that Connecticut's small businesses can access capital where they might not be able to through traditional banking systems. And then lastly, the Connecticut Manufacturing Innovation Fund is another extremely important initiative. It is focusing on one of our top industries, the manufacturing industry, and it provides funding for principally 3 different activities. One is to help fund new equipment. So manufacturers can purchase new equipment with the manufacturing voucher program. The manufacturer also puts in quite a bit of matching funds. So this is not a handout. This is a great public-private partnership model. The MIF also funds apprenticeships and incumbent worker training, which is to help existing workers at companies get upskilled for new positions within the same company so that they can remain valuable to their employer and can stay employed. So I will leave it there. That's the Boost Fund, the Brownfield Remediation Program, and the Connecticut Manufacturing Innovation Fund. Of course, looking forward to your questions, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much for that. We really appreciate that. A question that I'll kick us off with is, after 2 rounds of the Community Investment Fund 2030 grants, are there any statutory recommendations that you would make to actually improve that grant? That grant is really important, and that grant has helped out lots of communities and people. But are there ways to improve it from a statutory perspective?
Okay, so great question. Yes, the Community Investment Fund, we have proposed we've completed 2 rounds, as you rightly pointed out, and are moving on to the 3rd round. We've proposed changes to the policies and procedures as the rounds have gone on. So some nitty gritty, such as creating a separate grant for just planning activities, whereas previously planning and construction were lumped into one same application. So that's an example of a change that we've proposed, but we've been able to do that at the sort of policy level and program policy level as opposed to at the statutory level. There's nothing statutory that we're recommending at this time in order to have it move more smoothly. I think we're making all those improvements continuously at the procedures and policy level.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So as a hypothetical, if there are some applicants that are in there, let's say for a small amount that's for design phase or something like that, would they be not qualified, or are they kind of grandfathered in?
So what we just adopted actually at the meeting a week ago was a update to the program that enables applicants to apply for a $250,000 planning grant. And that's a standard amount, whether it's a ginormous project or a more modest project. 250 is the amount that you can apply for design, engineering, community meetings, all that planning work that happens at the beginning of a project and budgeting when you don't even know how much it's going to cost yet because you haven't designed it yet. So the example that you just gave of someone who's if you're a very tiny project that wouldn't even spend 250,000 of planning money, then possibly this might not be the right program for you. But for anyone that is going to have $250,000 of planning expenses, these grants are available. Of course, they're competitive like anything. You have to apply for them, but they'd be, and if you fit all the other eligibility criteria of CIF, you'd be able to apply for a $250,000 planning grant.
Thank you for your answer. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Representative Piscopo.
Thank you and welcome, Commissioner. I'm glad you're here. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And thank you for your presentation. I am the Connecticut Career Connect workforce program. I see 35 million in unallocated, and you've been authorized 20 and 20 for last year and this year. Can you comment on that? Are we meeting have you accessed the federal funds on that to make up for the?
I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Valiaris, who heads up the Office of Workforce Strategy, to address Career Connect.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Just a little bit of background information. The bond funding for Career Connect sits at the Department of Economic and Community Development because as the Office of Workforce Strategy was first established through an executive order, we were a unit underneath DECD. Since then, we've moved out into an independent state agency. And so one of our requests is to move that funding out of DECD to follow us. But to go back to your question, so this bond allocation was provided to us around the same time that the legislature and the governor proposed and passed $70 million of investment of ARPA dollars into Career Connect. And so that program is a pretty large undertaking, and we spent the majority of the last year and a half really operationalizing that program, and it is up and running and has some really great initial impacts. The bond dollars are meant to fill in the gaps for things that original 70 million is not able to do, such as adult learning, community outreach, transportation, pay it forward. There's many initiatives there that we're looking to operationalize the rest of those funds to do now that Career Connect has launched.
I don't think the people who are remote can hear you, Representative.
I'm sorry. I was on mute. Can you believe that? I'm in person and I'm on
In person and on mute. That's okay. It happens to the best of us.
Quick sum up on that question. Thank you, Senator. The Good to Great program has been great. And so it's benefited a lot of different local programs, worthy projects for legislators. But I see that you have an unallocated balance of 5.1 million. And there's no requests or recommendations for that. Do you foresee us using the unallocated funds
Yes.
for growing? Thank you.
Yes, I do foresee us using it. We opened, we had a round of applications for good to great applicants that closed just a couple weeks ago in March. And we expect to be making the awards in June. And the funding, we will be requesting some or all of this funding in order to fund the awardees of that most recent round of good to great. So there is an imminent, in the next couple months, plan to get that money committed.
And does that fall under the umbrella of arts and culture?
Yes.
Is there another line item I'm missing with arts and culture bonding, or is that the one?
The arts and culture, there is not, there is another item that has to do with arts and culture that is a combination of multiple museums that are,
Oh,
where
yes.
some of that funding is bunched together in a bonding request. I'm having trouble scanning it in my printout here, but there is one item here that would also address arts and culture, but really the majority of the arts and culture funding comes through the appropriations process.
And anything, you touched on Manufacturer Assistance Act in your opening. Can you follow up on that? There's, again, unallocated and no requests or recommendations from the governor.
Yep. So just to make a distinction between, I touched in my opening remarks on the Manufacturing Innovation Fund,
Oh, yeah.
and that, which it's word soup. So no, there's no, I can understand they get mixed up. So there's the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, which is where we requested 12, the governor's budget proposes $12 million of budget of bonding per year. Then there's also the Manufacturing Assistance Act, which is more of a legacy authorization. The unallocated balance of 54 million is really doesn't accurately reflect the picture of how we intend to spend those funds. Those funds are largely committed with the exception of about $1 million. Those funds are spoken for with about 30 million going through the Department of Labor through an incumbent worker training, about 10 million going to Connecticut Innovations, and then a handful of other commitments, including a $12 million authorization through the Office of Military Affairs. So even though the 54, pardon me, has not been requested, it has intended purposes. And as those programs I just mentioned need the funds, we will continue to draw down on the unallocated balance.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a breakdown on where that's going.
Yeah.
Just so the subcommittee could see that.
We will send you the spreadsheet that I am holding.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your questions. Next is our co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator, you got the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner, and your staff for coming before us today. I want to go back to the CIF very briefly. And I know that I'm a board member, so I know I voted. There was a vote. Let me just say there was a vote on changing some of the parameters. And so for some of the people who didn't make it after the first round, but qualified, but just didn't get selected, what happens to those people, to those requests?
So for each of the rounds, round 1 and 2 being complete at this point, the applications every application will get a communication from DECD saying whether they were selected, not selected, or ineligible. Those are sort of the 3 categories. And for folks that were selected, obviously the path forward is clear. They're going to have an assistance agreement with DECD and get their funding. For folks that were either ineligible or not selected, we provide them with the reason for why they were ineligible, if that's the case, or we provide them with the executive summary that you have seen yourself, Senator, in the big packet that we deliver to you of all of the executive summaries. We make sure that each applicant sees the summary that we did of their application, which has a section for strengths and weaknesses. And those weaknesses are contributing to the fact that the project didn't get funded by the board. And so we recommend to projects that they review those weaknesses and do their best to address those weaknesses. They're invited, they are welcome to reapply forever. There's no limit on how many times they can apply. And we still have another 8 rounds of CIF. So there will be more opportunities. And we're also available, the DECD staff has been remarkably available in helping with technical assistance for applications to get them as ready and prepared as possible for submission.
And the decision to lower the amount to create a planning grant for 250, is that the result of the type of a request you received? What was your decision making for that?
So that's a good question. I think the logic there is that we were getting a lot of applications for projects that were really early on in their process. And they were, they were writing up these big applications as if, and answering all the questions that we were asking of a project that was further along. So we were saying, what's your construction budget? What's your zoning timing? Give us all this detail on your project. When in fact, some of these projects they were just starting off. They hadn't yet completed the design or hadn't yet really gone through the community planning process. So this is basically an effort to just more appropriately match the application type to the applicant type. If you're early on in your process, let's make you fill out an application that reflects that asks you about the things you're doing early on. If you're further along in your process, then let's make sure we collect all the information from you of all the design work, everything you've done so far. And so it's really two different types of applicants that we're now putting into two different application processes. And I think it'll just save staff time, and it'll save time for the applicants as well, who didn't really have all the information to fill out as if they were a big construction project when they weren't yet there.
And so, so that was going to be my follow-up. Is there going to be a separate application for planning grants versus larger projects? And I think that's what you're saying, that there would be.
Yes, that's the plan to, as I said, save time on both the applicant's side and on the reviewer side.
And then what role does DECD play in identifying the final applicants that are awarded, or do they have any?
It really not a significant role. The packet of executive summaries that you receive, that all the board members receive, that's DECD's role. We are making sure that projects are eligible, step one, and then for any project that's eligible, we are reviewing it to provide a summary to all of the board members as to whether the application what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, and what the key salient points of that application are. And that's what goes in the executive summary. Those go out to the entire board. And from there on out, it's up to the board chairs and to the board to set the agenda.
Thank you. So my other question, I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the cannabis establishment loan program. Where is it? How we're doing? And I see Ginny Ray on here. Hi, how are
Hi.
you, the executive director? I'd like to hear more about that. It seems to be a very popular subject many places on what that. So if she could share a little bit of that, I'd appreciate it.
Happy to do so. My name is Ginny Ray Clay. I'm the Executive Director of the Social Equity Council. And the council has created a cannabis business revolving loan fund. Currently, it is funded at $10 million. The loans for the social equity approved applicants can go as high as $500,000. And the funds will be used to assist cannabis businesses in a variety of ways. So they can do things like renovate their facilities, they can buy machinery and equipment, they can have that machinery and equipment installed, they can make leasehold improvements, working capital, lines of credit, buy vehicles for official cannabis use, and upgrade technology infrastructure. The program should be launched this week. We had just a couple, this is a new program. So we had to create all new documents and go through the process to make sure that everything was done in the most legal and an appropriate way. So we are just finishing up all of the legalese related to the program. So we do expect to announce it this week. Again, it's $10 million. Those folks that are doing business that are provisionally licensed or licensed in the cannabis industry will have an opportunity to apply.
So this is a loan program?
It is a
and
loan.
It has to be repaid?
Yes, it does.
Over what period of time does someone have to repay?
It depends on what they're borrowing the money for. that would determine the repayment. Let me just get to, and we'll just in case you ask this, we will be lending up to 80% of the costs of the project. And it is 10 years for not more than 10 years. So they'll have up to 10 years to repay.
And that money, when it's repaid, will go back to what?
Back in, it's
To the
gonna go
fund?
back into the fund to be loaned out again.
Okay, so, so none of that money has been allocated yet.
Not yet.
All right. And you've got a $50 million authorization.
Mhm.
How do you plan on using that?
So right now, because it's very difficult to get funding for cannabis businesses to get started. And our social equity applicants and social equity approved folks have an even greater difficulty in getting funding. So right now, our plan is to use the money for the revolving loan fund. Although there are some other eligible uses of these funds, we are focusing on helping these companies get stood up by providing them with access to safe, reasonable capital.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for the team for coming out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Ginny Ray Clay. We appreciate that. Any further questions? Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Commissioner. Great to see you. And I do want to compliment DCD. I know it seems like in our rearview mirror, during COVID, your department was readily available and supportive. My appreciations to former Commissioner Lehman, and you and the deputy role were instrumental and helpful as well. So I wanted to say thank you. You cited the three major projects that you initiated that you're focused on, along with many others that you cited in your presentation. But in regards to the brownfields, we just had Deep appear before us earlier. What kind of work in tandem, as you wrote, do you do in kind of facilitating? Because we need Deep approval, but then do your funding come in after all the approval for the remediation and the contamination cleanup is occurring, or is it ongoing concurrent with Deep's valuation?
Okay, so let me take a stab at that, and then if I don't get to all the detail, we have our director of the Office of Brownfields on the line, who is a absolute gold mine and expert at all of these, at anything brownfields related. So the answer to your question is the first thing I want to point out is there's extremely close collaboration between DECD and DEEP as it relates to this brownfields remediation program. The clearest way to illustrate that is that all of the applications in each round of our funding, they're all reviewed by DEEP as well as by DECD. So DECD is the lead agency, making sure all the paperwork is in, making sure that we're evaluating exactly what the project is proposing to do, and that they have all their ducks in a row. But we're also making sure that DEEP is seeing each of those applications, because they ultimately have more expertise in the actual permitting and the actual remediation itself. And so if there were a flag, if there were an issue, an application where, it's a owner that has a consent order or some issue with DEEP, they would flag for us, this is not a strong application that you want to be funding through DECD, because they've not been a responsible party in a DEEP process in the past, or an example like that. We also require detailed remediation plans from the applicants at the time of the application. So they are not saying, oh, there's a dirty patch of ground outside my window, I think I might think about cleaning it up. That's not what these applications look like, to be a little facetious. They have a very detailed remediation plan included in their application. Does that answer your question? And if not, I'm happy to bring in the big guns.
Yes, it's very helpful. Any information is valued. But I also want, if your expert could provide, you cited that you provide low interest loans and grants to qualify applicants. Who are the qualify applicants? Is it the municipality? Is it the private market? Who are the qualify applicants to request the money to do these kind of environmental and brownfield studies?
So the answer is twofold. When it comes to our grant program, we require a municipal applicant frequently, in probably 9 times out of 10, the municipality is working alongside a private property owner or developer. And we like it that way because we like to see when you've got that team together, you've got the municipality who we have probably had experience working with. And so it's a good interface between the municipality and DECD. But we like to also see that private developer who's motivated to get it going. We like to see these dollars actually put to use, right? And no one's more motivated than someone trying to clean up a site, build something on it, and make money off of it. So we like that private sector engagement, and we do have that on most of our applications. But importantly, the grant does go to the municipality, who then usually passes it through to the private owner or developer.
Thank you for that clarification, and it'll help for maybe some of the private market realize that they should go through their municipalities to formulate the application. I'm going to quickly move, respecting other people's time. The Small Business Boost program, you've relaunched it with a new name, but am I correct to assume it was the Small Business Express? And if indeed was based upon previous funding, what is the difference and the rationale for the boost? Is it the pool of specific targeted, as you mentioned earlier, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses? But how has it differ from the Business Express, which has been remarkably effective and much valued in the industry? And I'm appreciative of moving on, but just wanted to be sure why the name change and the relaunch. What's the new initiative to that?
So you're right that this is the iteration, the evolution of Express. There is a big difference here, which is that with Boost, the state is not doing direct lending. And in Boost is a partnership where half of the funding is coming from the state. It's a $150 million program over 5 years. Half of that is going to come from DECD, but half of that is coming from the private sector. And the actual lending activity itself, the underwriting, the servicing of the loans, that's all being done by community partners and by NDC, the sort of master facilitator, for lack of a better word. That's our private partner here. And this was a strategy that was developed under my predecessor. So I can't take credit for the ins and outs of it, but I certainly definitely agree with the logic of it, which is that we don't want to be competing with community lenders and with Connecticut banks. We want to be supporting them. So this is a program where we're trying, where banks are getting this business. It's not that the state is stealing potential customers from our banks and our community lenders. We're actually providing a pipeline of customers. We're handing off customers that come in through our Boost system that apply through the Boost fund. And we're turning those over to the banks and the lenders and saying, here's a customer, and we'll provide 50% of the funding for their loan if you agree under your underwriting process that they are credit worthy and someone that you want to lend to. So that's the key difference, is we are no longer directly lending. We're partnering with community lenders and banks to lend to these small businesses.
Now, do you have a list of participating banks that are collaborating with you, or all banks within the state that do business in the state participating? And the reason for asking that is, the second follow-up to that is, will the state be assisting with some of the guidelines and requirements and what they call the collateral and track record? Because I know the Small Business Express was helping a lot of businesses that don't have the financial numbers to be able to provide and avail themselves to the loans in the private marketplace. That was the lure and the tremendous appeal. Will that change, or will it now revert back to the higher standard? And look, the last week in the news about banking and the liquidity challenge in that marketplace could also impact if private banks are now administering and reviewing these loans. Is there any safeguards to ensure that DECD has a partner in the 150 million in that have a say in being able to review some flexibility in qualifications of getting that loan?
Yes. So let me take that in parts. So the first question, I think, is about, is this program continued to be targeted at businesses that might not otherwise have access to capital? And I should have mentioned that in my introduction. it is. It's very important. That is the mission of this program, as it was with Express. And there's a couple elements that are baked into the guidelines, which we had a very active hand in reviewing. So I didn't mean to suggest that we just handed them the money and that the lenders came up with all the guidelines and the parameters. Not at all. Our team was extremely involved in those guidelines, including, first of all, it's a really low interest rate. It's 4.5%. And that's locked in. That's for every lender, that's for every borrower that's approved. So that's an important benefit to these businesses. And it's also only eligible, businesses of a certain size are eligible, up to 100 employees. So again, it's making sure that we're targeting these smaller businesses. Now, to answer your question, what if someone just doesn't, what if they don't fit the qualifications? There are still requirements here, right? We're not lending to a business that doesn't have a business plan or has a really, truly challenging credit score. We do still have minimum requirements in the underwriting here, but if a business applies through Boost and they aren't successful in their first application, they aren't matched with a lender, we have a whole suite of technical assistance programs. And that's something that's another element that was funded with previous bond funds. We have $46 million that went out to 10 different community partners, roughly 10 different small business support programs that are helping businesses raise their credit score, put together a business plan, put together their financial projections so that they themselves can figure out what size loan is appropriate, what size interest payment can they actually support on ongoing operations. So we're using the expression no business left behind, where if someone is making it through the Boost application process, not getting funded at the end, that is not the end of the process. You then get referred into technical assistance through these 10 or so community partners so that you can come back in and apply again and hopefully be successful the next time around, now that you've gotten all that technical assistance and improved your application.
I appreciate that clarification, and that gives some comfort to businesses that are struggling, that may not be traditional. And I'm appreciative that the department acknowledges that not everybody fits the same mold and cookie cutter size. So I thank you. And I think the other reinforcement that's comforting is the fact that even though you no longer administer the program, you still have money in the game and you are a guiding hand. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
You are a guiding hand and collaborating with making sure that these businesses that are looking to survive and sustain themselves work in concert, but obviously go through the normal banking. You're not in this for the long-term loan, but you are looking to be a support and guiding hand to help small businesses of unique different sizes and origination to succeed.
And one more point that I forgot to mention that I think answers your question further is that so far in the loans made, over 50% of those loans have been made to women or minority or veteran-owned businesses. So we are achieving that goal. 50% was the goal we set for ourselves, and we are achieving that. So we are, I think we're on the right track in terms of reaching the types of businesses that we intended to reach.
No, I appreciate that. And I wanted to kind of repeat again, the focus of this Boost program is for women-owned, minority-owned, and our veterans who are initiating businesses. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Madam Commissioner, for your information and insight.
Thank you for your question, Senator. Representative Farrar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. And I know I missed the beginning, but I hope my questions will catch up a little bit. One was just following up a little bit on my colleagues' questions about the $12 billion for the Connecticut Manufacturing Innovation Fund. I see in the materials that it references grants or loans. Is there a specified amount that you all intend to be associated with grants versus loans, or is it really a 50-50 mix?
I'm going to refer that to our Chief Manufacturing Officer, who I believe is on the line, Paul Lavoie. Is there any color we can shed on the plan for a breakdown between grants and loans at this point?
Yes, absolutely. So all of our programs in the Manufacturing Innovation Fund are grant programs. We offer no loans, no loan programs at all. And our grant programs are really around equipment purchases and workforce development. So we offer a $100,000 grant for manufacturers with 100 employees or less for the purchase of equipment or an upgrade of a system within their manufacturing facility. We also offer grants. These are all matching grant programs, by the way. They're all matching grants. So, for example, the MVP program is a 33% match on your first use and 25 on any other uses, up to $100,000. We offer an incumbent worker training matching grant that will match 50 cents on the dollar for manufacturers for training of their existing workforce. And that is up to $50,000 a year and up to $100,000 lifetime. And that's for a manufacturer with 300 employees or less. And then we also have programs that are around apprenticeships, internships, cybersecurity assessments, and essentially that's it. Those are grant programs that the monies that we provide for manufacturers for, again, to have interns, to have engineering interns, to have apprentices, and then also to make sure that they have a solid cybersecurity plan in their manufacturing operations. So they're all grant programs. We've funded, our MVP, the manufacturing voucher program, is our signature program. And that program this year will award close to $7 million in grants to small manufacturers, 100 employees or less.
Thank you for that. I did just want to have one other follow-up to that. So thank you for clarifying again that these are grants and both of those are matching grants. And I appreciate you highlighting that the size of the companies is 100 or less, particularly for the equipment. And then I heard 300 or less for the incumbent workers. Does the fund also seek to have geographic diversity in how it distributes the grant funding?
We track the diversity of where the funds are going. We don't target where, this is a manufacturer will make an application, but we market the program statewide, but we do track where the funds are going. In our MIF annual report, we'll take a look at, if they're going to distressed communities, where the manufacturers are located. But from an the outreach we do is statewide to make sure that all manufacturers know that these programs are available, and they're all on a first come, first served basis. But we generally fund them at rates where we're not turning anybody away.
Thank you for that. And then finally, just following up on the Manufacturing Innovation Fund. I know that you mentioned last year there was $7 million distributed. The request here is for 12 million. Do you have a sense of how many total number of manufacturers you might be able to support with the $12 million? Or is that really dependent on what your applications look like?
Yeah, it certainly depends on the application. So we were awarded, just for a point of clarification, $10 million last year. 7 million was in one program alone. The 12 million, I will tell you that the way that we're marketing the programs and the outreach that we're doing, the 12 million will go pretty quickly into all of those programs. But we also use the Manufacturing Innovation Fund for other programs, such as a Hearts and Minds advertising campaign, which is changing the perception of manufacturing in the state. We have a manufacturing ambassador program, a manufacturing concierge program. So these are all programs that are outreach programs to manufacturers. So we're impacting thousands of manufacturers on a regular basis. And then the funding, we funded the manufacturing voucher program with $2 million initially. So that's, at $100,000 grants, that would be 20 manufacturers. And then we had to add another 5 million to the program to continue to meet the demand. So I would tell you that, we're probably reaching, with just the manufacturing voucher program, we're reaching well over 100 companies because they're not all taking the maximum amount. But those that data is in my Manufacturing Innovation Fund report, which I can pull up.
Well,
I can get you that number.
Yeah,
Yeah, Paul, I
please
think
feel free
we'll-
just to follow up. I think more than anything, I appreciate all the detail because I do think it illuminates there is so much demand. I know in all of our communities, we have manufacturers that could benefit from these monies. And I think more than anything, we want to make sure that we are supporting the growth of this fund. So all that feedback you provided is very helpful. Commissioner, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah.
No, not at all. I was just going to say the same thing, which is we will provide you with the detail, which is included in the MIF annual report and will breaks it down in great detail. And I will just also say, in addition to the truly data-driven numeric support for the demand that we will show you, I can also anecdotally say Paul and I are visiting manufacturers all the time, and there is not only demand from manufacturers that know about this program, there are still so many manufacturers that don't even yet know about it. We are educating folks frequently when you go into a manufacturer, say, hey, did you know about all the funds that are available out there? And frequently they don't, frequently that's the first time they're hearing about it. So there's just so much more potential demand for these from businesses that haven't yet been touched by Paul's very robust education campaign that we're going to continue to pursue over the next couple of years.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I've had that happen to me in person, in West Hartford and Newington as well. So the more voices we have sharing about these programs is pivotal, but making sure the funding is there and that we are having the funding meet the demand, make sure that we can meet the needs of all these businesses. And then just one final question, since we have Kelly Batteries here, I can't let Kelly go. I just wanted to follow up. I know that, we had pursued $70 million in the original authorized funds for Career Connect. I know that there's the 35 in unallocated balance. Could you speak to really just the plan of use for that 35 moving forward? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So this fund is meant to provide gap funding for things that the original 70 million is not able to do. So with the first round of funding, we're doing community outreach, where we're really doing boots on the ground within those communities to get the word out, to drive people to fill out the applications and enter into these job training programs. We're also piloting an incumbent worker training program that's modeled after the MIF. So the MIF incumbent training workers has been very successful, but that funding is not available to other industry sectors such as healthcare and IT. So we'll be using some of the funding for that. Basic skills education. So WIOA dollars are only eligible for those who do not have a high school diploma. And we're realizing that the majority of people coming through Career Connect in the workforce, AJCs, are basic skills deficient and need remediation. So we're adding funding for that. We're also working on an alternate transportation fund. Transportation is a major barrier for people to be able to enter job training programs and work. All of the Career Connect funding provides transportation to and from while they're in training. But as soon as they complete their training program and they go to find a job, that transportation issue can be a major barrier. So we're looking to develop a fund for which people can apply to have their car fixed, get a driver's license, all of those types of things that they may not have the ability to do with their current funding. We're also working with a career accelerator program. So this was part of a legislative bill last year to develop a career accelerator fund for CDL licensing. We would like to expand that fund beyond CDL. So this would provide opportunities for no interest loans, paying forward only a portion of that loan that would include the job training costs, not the supportive services. And these will be for people who will not be eligible for WIOA funding. And as the Career Connect dollars get spent down, there's really a big gap in between what people can afford for these short-term training programs because they're not Pell eligible versus what they're eligible for federal funding. So there's that. And then we're looking to enhance funding to SNAP ENT, which provides a 50% reimbursement from the federal funds. So these will be for additional job training programs as the 70 million is spent down. We're also looking to enhance our data systems, provide funding for our diversity, equity, and inclusion projects with the 5 subcommittees, and have some funding left, hopefully, for very important initiatives around career pathway programs for high school students and work-based learning experiences.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you for that
welcome.
exhaustive list. And I apologize if you had gone over that in your testimony earlier. I missed that, but if you wouldn't mind sending that list in full to us, I think that would be very helpful, just to distinguish again what we have done, but again, what we're trying to do moving forward. So thank you for that, Kelly.
Absolutely. happy to.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your good questions. Representative Baumgartner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do see we're starting to run over, so I will be brief. But thank you so much for coming out today. Quick question regarding the Strategic Defense Investment Act. I know there was a prior authorizations for the program that surrounded, I believe, the scaling up of manufacturing at Sikorsky. Obviously, in the last decade, we've seen a resurgence in the defense sector in Connecticut, much to be celebrated. Some of our largest employers, right in my backyard in Groton now, the largest private sector employer, Electric Boat, and they'll certainly be hiring a lot more folks over the coming years. So my question is how prior bond authorizations for Electric Boat or programs surrounding the scaling up of their campus at their South Yard Assembly Building, how that differentiates from the kind of contractual commitments that have been made to Sikorsky through this specific program.
Sure. So we can get you the details of the Electric Boat support that supported the beautiful new building that they are now in, and they are now building submarines in. I don't have that with me, so we'll follow up with you with exactly what the milestones were that they were required to hit, and the progress to date on how they've done on hitting those milestones.
And I think the same would apply to unallocated funds, just commitments for a sub base as well. In the years past, when the federal government did not provide a lot of the supports for, our sub base at one point back in 2005, it was, as Bob Ross knows very well, it was facing closure. And there are many folks, everyone pulled together, the state and local stakeholders. It was a bipartisan affair, and ensuring that we stood together to ensure that the subbase wouldn't close. Fast forward, we're building two Virginia class subs a year, and now the Ohio replacement program, and subbase that has had a lot of investment due to state resources, obviously, as well as federal resources. So look forward to learning more and how we can also make sure municipalities are partnering with Bob Ross and the Office of Military Affairs and your team on housing initiatives too, and workforce housing needs. And then lastly, just with respect to the cultural grants, I know the good to great programs. I'd like to see a prioritization of communities that have become or adopted cultural districts, which was defined per state statute within the last couple of years. And those are programs where DECD is already working with our local arts districts, regional arts districts. I know New London and Stonington have already voted to establish those districts. And so thank you again for your time. I look forward to working with your team.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you for your questions. And our last question comes from Mary Mashinsky. I think you're muted, Representative.
You're right. I didn't hit it hard enough. I wanted to ask if DECD would, if they're not already doing this, they would consider gas cards or similar for people who have private auto, but they don't have enough gas money to get to the training. If that is covered, or do you just do bus passes and rail passes? First question.
Yes, I think that question is for Career Connect and the Transportation Fund.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
So we will be having a comprehensive view of all different options that would benefit people where they're at. So yes, we would be considering all of those things in this transportation fund.
Okay. Yeah, I would ask you specifically to do that because I have run into that with constituents. They have a car, they just don't have the money to buy the fuel. And then another question that comes up regularly is I know the manufacturers prefer younger workers, and we've had some success getting younger workers into the manufacturing careers. The middle-aged ones are not desirable by the manufacturers, although I wish to get them into a new career, which is more sustainable and gives them better quality of life. Is there a way we can direct the managers of the fund to set aside some for older workers who are making a career change, and also to encourage manufacturers to look at that category of people, because it seems that we're really good at getting the young workers out there, but the other ones are being left behind. They are not as desirable to the manufacturers, and I'm seeing that as a regular problem in my area.
So thank you for bringing that to my attention. That wasn't anything that I had heard before. I can go back and get the statistics of the number of people in the age bands that they are in our training programs. We are working to market these opportunities broadly to all different demographics and age groups around the state of Connecticut. And so we're happy to do additional targeting marketing to folks in that middle age bracket. But I think it is very important to ensure that people have on and off ramps to any careers that they're interested in, no matter what their age group is.
Thank you very much. I know for manufacturers' point of view, they probably want to invest their money in the young worker so they can keep them for 3 decades or more. But for these other folks who might be very good workers because they have a good work ethic, they are not being called up. And I've tried with some of these folks for years to get them into manufacturing, but they just aren't favored by the manufacturers. So if you can help with that, I would greatly appreciate it.
We will absolutely do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I want to thank both agencies, DECD and OWS, for being here today. Both your agencies provide real support for small businesses and for our workforce pipelines that are making a difference. And we appreciate your efforts and your staff's all their efforts. And just going forward, we look forward to working with you on these important issues. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Okay, next we will have the Capital Regional Development Authority Board to come up and address our subcommittee. We do have some time to try to make up here, so if we can do that, that would be great. Whenever you're ready, you may begin your presentation.
Thank you. Senator Moore, Representative Napoli. My name is Mike Freemuth. I'm the Executive Director of the Capital Region Development Authority. I have here with me today Joe Jeremiah, who's our CFO, and tracks all the dollars and manages the funds as they come in. As you may know, CRDA is the successor to the old CETA, which was established in 2000 to build out Adrian's Landing. 2012, CRDA was created as an adjunct to that and an expansion upon those authorities to develop in the downtown Hartford area. We have essentially 3 tasks ahead of us. We're responsible for large state-owned venues such as the Convention Center, Rensselaer Field, the XL Center. We manage over 18,000 parking spaces across multiple parking lots. And of course, we have a housing initiative in the downtown. Our third element of our job is to do regional development. And to date, we've been working in East Hartford, Weathersfield, and a few years ago, we did a project in Newington. We're also responsible for the regional market, which is transferred to us several years ago from the Department of Agriculture in the South Meadows of Hartford. Today, as we sit here, we have about 15 projects in construction that utilize state bond funds, and we have renovations and repairs underway in 7 garages. We're working at the Convention Center, Rensselaer Field, and of course, XL on various capital improvements. And as we sit here today, we have over 8 housing projects in the pipeline with over 800 units of housing to go into construction. So our multiple tasks are spread out in all the various programs. We have 7 different bond programs, as well as an appropriation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have on the programs and the agency's initiatives.
So thanks for your testimony. I'll start. So I'm just curious, has there been any conversations around the murder program?
MRDA,
Yes.
there has been. I honestly don't know where they all go. I get inquiries from time to time. MRDA was an attempt several years ago. It was approved as a special act to basically take the CERTA type initiative statewide and allow it to operate in a similar way in other cities in the state. To date, that board has not been instituted, nor has the programs begun.
The Excel Center.
Mhm.
What is the status of the renovation project? And what major milestones are you expecting to hit in the near future?
Next major milestone would be the completion and the opening of the sports betting complex on the Ann Street side of the building. We have been over the last 2 years working on replacing the ice system as well as the expansion of the concourse out for the sports betting facility. Hopefully that opens this summer. We have about 65 million authorized but not bonded for the building. But the governor has indicated that he'll be willing to float those bonds and use them if it can be married up with some private investment. We put together a program we believe can regenerate some activity in the building. Activity level has been down. It's been going down. The building is almost 50 years old. Really, we leave a lot of money on the table because we don't have the right revenue streams. And we have a higher expense profile based on some of the old utility systems. So our program is to renovate the lower bowl, improve the revenue lines, both in the way seating is done and concessions is done, make improvements to the loading dock areas, which allow us to tackle the concert business better than we have, and improve the revenue stream of the property.
Thanks for your response. Co-chair, Senator Moore.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Hi, how you been?
Good to see you. So I'm really interested in MRDA. And I see the governor has reinstituted putting some money back into it because the way I understand the money was swept out of it and nothing happened. And I heard my co-chair ask you a little bit about it, but I'd like to hear from you how others could benefit from what you've done with CRD if we were to do the other project.
Yes, MRDA is designed to follow the same program initiatives as CRDA. However, it needs its own board. CRDA is very Hartford centric. Its board is made up of state officials and local officials, really who are most familiar with downtown Hartford. The MRDA needs to go through a process of creating a board that would be sensitive to the issues, whether it's in Bridgeport or Waterbury or New Haven or other large cities. The point to be made, however, though, is the CRDA is a gap financer. We're supposed to be brought to the table as the last in. Our funds are most flexible. Our funds are meant to be designed to meet the needs of the project as opposed to take a project to meet the needs of our program. Often we put out monies for housing and require it to be used a certain way. We reverse that process. We look at projects and we say, what do we need to do to make the hole filled? So I think in the case of Bridgeport, certainly in the case of Waterbury, some of the large cities, there's a disconnect between the cost of a project and what it's worth at the end of the day. It may cost 100 million to build something that's worth 80 million. Our job is to fill that gap in between, to bring it up to par. That's the initiative that's hard to present in underwriting. It's hard to present to standard federal and state programs. And it often has to be justified based on the uniqueness of individual projects. We do gap filling for industrial projects, neighborhood projects, housing projects. They're all done differently. And so you need an underwriting staff, you need a construction staff, and you need the legal and accounting teams to kind of put it together. The thing that MRDA can do is be project-specific implementers on behalf of the state to work with individual cities.
Do you know how much was in the budget for that when it was originally initiated? And tell me, when was it initiated the first time?
I think it goes back about 4 years. It was a special act. I don't have the exact date on it. I would guess around 2015 or 2016. It was adopted by the legislature. Its board would be appointed by the governor, and members of the legislature would include individual representatives of the cities that are eligible. I think you have to have over 70,000 population to be eligible to be part of the MRDA program. There's been some criticism of that because it may leave out the Bristols and the Meridans and the New Londons that might should be eligible as well, but does focus on the large cities. The funding was never authorized. I believe there was some initial money that wasn't released to create the administrative structure. MRDA can use and legally, it's in the statute, should use CRDA as an administrative support to the MRDA so that you would have a commission, but you wouldn't necessarily have to create another quasi to implement it. You can utilize our staff, but those funds never were released. And I think there was some bond funds. Honestly, they may still be on the book someplace that would be eligible for allocation, but there hasn't been any real program funds put into the program.
And a board was never created.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike, great to see you. Two quick questions. One, excuse me. When was the initiative undertaken to put gambling into the Excel Center?
Well, that was done in the sports betting authorization. The lottery was instructed to create, I believe, 15 retail outlets, and they were to be in some of the large cities, including Hartford. So the lottery did select Excel as the place to do that.
And do you have the current list of the other remaining 14 locations?
No,
Has that
that
been made
I-
public?
Lottery perhaps does, but I'm not part of that.
Well, maybe that's a follow-up question to get that answer,
Sure.
because I think municipalities would like to know what the lottery is thinking about putting into their municipalities. The second point is there has been conversations in regards to UConn and their sporting activities vis-a-vis hockey and men's and women's basketball. What does UConn bring to the table in regards to business activity and the surrounding energy and economic initiative if they should decide to not engage with Excel?
Well, they'd hurt us if they don't engage with Excel, obviously. UConn is a major element of the building's event load. There are some 80,000 UConn alumni within 30 minutes of downtown Hartford. Their sponsorships are in downtown Hartford. They have 4, maybe it's 5 campuses in the downtown Hartford area: regional campus, Lost campus, the business school, the health school. UConn is Hartford, and it needs to be downtown. Now, can UConn make some money at the Excel? I would argue they do make money today at the Excel. It's certainly, we can give you numbers that show what it costs them to play in the building and what they earn in the building. And it's a positive. Could they earn more? Yes. How could they earn more? Change our agreement and allow them to tap into some of the revenue streams that we like to recreate with the seating and the concession program mapped out in a new capital plan. But for UConn to simply not play down here, I think it would be to a disadvantage for the school. They do today roughly 30 events. About half of them are hockey, and most of those will go on campus now. Most of the hockey games, with the exception, I think 4 or 5 will still, 4 or 5 will be on campus. I'm sorry, 4 or 5 will be downtown. The remainder will be on campus. The college games, there's 2 things you got to keep in mind with the college basketball games. One, kids aren't on campus in January. So playing downtown, there is an advantage to that. 2, there are larger events. You get certain games where you will pack the house that you can't pack up at Gamble. So I think the margins are better for certain events. And certainly there is a population base in the Hartford region that supports the school, whether it's their campuses or whether it's their alumni, that I believe Excel provides an answer to. So.
Under the agreement, you said there's a possibility of renegotiation. Is there an opening during that time period that's available to both parties?
Yeah, actually, we've been operating on a year-to-year basis right now, primarily because we're trying to figure out if we're going to renovate the building and how. The program right now would allow them to restructure their participation in the event so they can get a higher take on the number of people in the building and how we basically provide them a share. Right now, it's hard. Most of the building's a general admission building. I mean, you pay a little bit more for certain seats than others, but there's 16,000 seats. They all are the same. Realistically, today's buildings, modern arenas, They do club seating, terrace seating, loge seatings, suite seatings, general admission. You have multiple price points, multiple advantages, a lot of money that can be generated simply by how you pick your seats. UConn could take advantage of that as well. So too with concessions. We're very limited in that way. The F&B business, food and beverage, has a lot of room for growth that we could share with UConn as well.
Thank you. And I thank you to the chair for the indulgence of it. The reason I asked that is obviously if UConn maintains that relationship, it's a win-win, but obviously the caveat is making the improvements that you're requesting through these bond requests to be able to offer a product that both parties can engage and celebrate and gain on it. So that is the reason for me asking UConn and the dynamics of it. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Piscopo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Sure.
My question, a general one, during the late teens, it seems that you were doing a lot of housing in downtown Hartford, and they were going as quick as you could build them, and a lot of millennials and stuff coming into the city. That has had to have gone down. That demand seems to have gone down drastically in the early 20s. Am I correct in that?
Actually, our occupancies for all the properties that we've invested in are north of 90%. Some are literally with waiting lists. So the demand is still there. The rents have not yet reached a level that would sustain private investment in its entirety, would be enough to make the hurdle rate for the equity returns or pay back mortgages in their entirety. So we still have a gap there, and the rents haven't reached the levels they need to sustain it purely on a private basis. Now there's a lot of people pushing back that rents are too high, so we're working, against ourselves a little bit. We do set aside 20% as a rule of the units for affordable that discounts the rents. But still, the basic question is the mismatch between what the private sector is willing to put in and what it needs to get a project done. Having said that, once the units are online, whether we invest in them through grants or loans or credits, they're leased up almost immediately. The demand's still there. Most of it's new to town. About 70% of the tenants are new to the region. Most of them are between 20 and 40, and most of them are single. So that's the cohort we see. A lot of it is folks establishing themselves in the region. They might land a job in an insurance company or over at the PWA plant or something, and they settle into the city because that's where the young want to be. But today, we're still seeing pretty strong demand. The trick today is really the interest rates, cap rates, and construction costs are starting to gallop out from under us, which is a problem for everybody in business. And that's slowing down our pipeline a little bit, the number of units we can build.
Thank you. And you anticipated my follow-up with the private sector. So thank you for that. My question just goes to that 66.7 million unallocated in that line item. It seems in your summary that you have that pretty much allocated in the near future. Is that?
Yes, there's
true?
actually, I think there's 8 projects we have right.
Away from housing.
No, they're actually housing.
Okay.
The nature of the beast is they're mixed use, really. You'll find some retail, some commercial mixed into some of these buildings, just by the nature of what they are. The big demand's coming, I can see it in the horizon, is the requirement that we try to convert some of the office structures to residential because of the drop off in office demand. That is got a lot of folks talking about how to reposition properties, and all of them will be looking our way to help them convert them to residential. So though we have 8 or 9 projects that we're working on today, I can envision twice that many tomorrow coming at us for conversion money.
Thank you. It also authorizes you to do outside of your region, if you will. Have you done anything that way?
Yes, we're able to operate in the 7 towns that touch Hartford. We can operate anyone that we enter an agreement with that community. So we could not just simply do a project in Windsor. Windsor would have to approach us, enter an agreement with us, and then ask us to participate in a project. So it has to be proactive on those communities' part. To date, East Hartford, Weathersfield, and Newington have each done that. Most of our activity today is in East Hartford. We see some large projects coming at Founders Plaza, some stuff along Silver Lane. The old Showcase Cinema sites are all being queued up for commercial and residential development in that town. And that's where most of our action has been outside of the downtown core.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your questions. Representative Farr.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi to you both. Thanks for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. I wanted to ask a little bit about the program area around renovations and improvements, specifically to the convention center and Rentschler Field. I know when we probably saw each other last, we were kind of still reckoning with coming out of the pandemic. And I know there was certainly, you all provided kind of a good update for us about where the overall convention center business and again, the use of Rentschler Field was given coming out of COVID. So broadly, I would love to understand again where those, where the kind of that business picture looks for both of those entities. But then secondly, I know that there's the request around the 17 million and would just like to understand what that is specifically going towards and how it meets the needs of those facilities in the next 10 years. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Very different properties.
Very different, yeah.
Very different. First, Rentschler Field, and both are about 20 years old, if you will. Their life cycle of most of their capital systems are starting to be taxed, starting to wear out, and that's what we're confronting in both properties. They're different for each, of course. Rentschler was built for Yukon, but is not exclusive to Yukon. But the events that are held there all have to break even or do better, or we can't book them. Only because very simply, Yukon doesn't want to underwrite them. So either an event has to come in on the mark or better to book Rentschler. To date, actually the last fiscal year we closed, we actually did pretty good at Rentschler with the lacrosse event, several soccer events, a winter light show and a few other things. Rentschler actually came in above the line last year, came in positive. This year, it's going to fall short of that because we didn't have those soccer games or the national lacrosse tournament. And those are major shortages. But the buildings themselves, as far as their capital needs, the biggest single item we have confronting us is the roof systems. That is our biggest individual item. The second one is technology. For events today, literally the trucks come in, they take a plug and they plug into a building. You come to Rentschler and you spend 2 days running wires. And that's just a simple reality. When Rentschler was built, I think there's probably a half a dozen or maybe a dozen ticket windows. Your ticket today is on your phone. And if you're standing in the wrong line with the wrong sun, I can't read it. We don't accept cash anymore. So the technology to process debit cards, credit cards, and your phone charges to buy a soda or a hot dog has changed. The building wasn't ever designed for any of that stuff. So technology is very big, broadcasting, the roof systems, and the weatherization, the water systems. We had Populous come in and do an engineering assessment of the building as it came up on its 20th anniversary. Populous is international arena and stadium developers. They came at us with a $60 million program, and we put it together over 5 years, 12 million each for the next 5 years to tackle the various capital upgrades the property needs. The field's in very good shape, but the facility itself is getting worn out and tired, and some of it is HVAC systems, some of it is, very routine electrical and plumbing issues. The other 5 million of that 17 that you mentioned is dedicated to the convention center. The convention center activity level has come back, but not back to pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, we were running about 300,000 people through the building on an annualized basis. Today, I think we'll come up short, probably in a 225 range, and it's growing. Now, we're seeing an uptick in events. We're seeing upticks in attendance at the events. We still haven't reached that full level. The second thing that's happening is not all events are the same. We had the Van Gogh exhibit, for instance. We had 70,000 people go to the building. They were there for an hour. Getting 2,000 people to stay for 3 days would do much better. You know, they park longer, they go to the restaurants, they use the hotel. They come in for an hour show, they drive in, they drive home. So you have to look at who's in the building and what the real events are and who's attending them. But the attendance level is probably just still shy, maybe 20-25% below our peak. And it's coming up. And so we're starting to get greater utilization of the property as we go forward, and we're projecting more for next year. The 5 million is basically staying on top of it. Everything from dishes to chairs to tables to technology and waterproofing. The biggest problem we seem to have day in, day out of there is maintaining the water tightness of the structure. There's a huge plaza around the building. It all filters down below into the building. And that's a constant problem for us. So a lot of the 5 million is dedicated to technology, making sure the building still can stay and produce and perform for the people coming into it. And it'll be spread out over several years. So I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, just to clarify then, so similar to what you mentioned with Rentschler are you anticipating 5 million continuously year after year for the structure?
Yeah, we've actually been running 2 to 3 million a year.
Okay.
And it's getting a little bit more expensive. We just put an elevator system in. It cost us over $1 million,
Mhm.
you know, one elevator. So you get an idea how it can hit hard. The waterproofing, we probably are looking at 2 to 3 million to waterproof the esplanade that runs along the river. So that's going to be a big hit to us. Technology is constantly changing. We no sooner put a backbone in and it changes tomorrow morning. So we're constantly on a curve on that one that we're chasing. So.
And just kind of given the book of business you mentioned, I know you said that, you know, you're kind of, let's say 25% away from where you used to be. Are you seeing that pretty consistently with other convention centers in the region or nationally, or are we still kind of behind the boat in that way?
We're probably in the fair midland of most buildings. Most of the industry that we're tracking is projected 24 and 25 as the recovery points. There are some buildings doing better. I mean, MSG is doing great. The casinos, that's a whole different animal. But most of the convention trade really one of two things happened. There was a dramatic reduction in number of events, or they pushed them all out. And they pushed them out several. What happens is the business runs in cycles. We might see a show every 3 years. And if we missed that 1 year in COVID, we're 3 years out before we see them again. So a little bit of it is catching up to the cycle that's built into event loads. But the industry is telling us 24 and 25 as the point to recover. So in our budget, on our appropriation side of our budget, we're thinking along those lines. We probably need another year and a half to trough out from the COVID impact.
Okay, thank you for that. It's very helpful. Appreciate the answers, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your good questions. Representative Baumgartner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming in to share with us the work you're doing at the CRDA. My question centers on the acquisition of the regional food hub. Obviously, during the pandemic, a facility, in addition to Rentschler, that was utilized heavily for purposes that perhaps you never intended those facilities to be used for, getting food out into our communities as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And so I know that the transfer of ownership happened sometime in 2019, just before the pandemic. Do you believe, in your eye, is that should CRDA be in the business of kind of managing that regional food site? If I'm not mistaken, it's the largest distribution site between Boston and New York. So obviously serving a very important need in our communities.
No,
Yes.
it's not our business. We were asked to get involved because we're in the property maintenance and property management business. And that facility, if the arenas are old, that one is really old. There's no two systems in that building that even talk to each other. We have a real dilemma in that I think that entire complex should be replaced. It's just tired and dated and doesn't meet all the needs of everybody that's in the business of distributing food from farmer to your table in home. A lot of it also should be privately oriented. I think the private sector can do a lot more of it and not necessarily require the public sector to do it. The one element that I would caution you on is there is a need to link the small independent farmer scattered across the state with the marketplace and to do it in a way that is fair to connect them from the producer side to the distribution side. Some of that is done privately. A lot of that is just missed. There's also need to extend the season for a lot of farmers. What we found is, their season is very short. So greenhouses or hydroponics, or even converting food to take your cucumbers and make them into pickles or something that would allow for commercial kitchen and the conversion of product and extension of basically what a farmer can offer. There are those elements that the private sector doesn't always address. And so that piece of it's probably a public role and one we would do with the Department of Agriculture. And we can collect the rent and make sure leases are renewed and insurances are in place and snow is plowed. But I'm not in the agricultural business, and that's really a DOAG issue. And they'd be far better at telling you where it should go. But the facilities are antiquated. Private sector can do a lot of it. There's some stuff on the edges that helps the small farmers, and that's really ag policy. And this big facility can probably have a better day ahead of it.
So perhaps this is something maybe offline, continuing discussions with the Department of Agriculture and the appropriate parties, but.
Correct. We've done a couple studies on the facility where it needs to go based on today's food industry as well as the state's needs. One thing COVID taught us was that we have a very small supply of food. And so Connecticut 2, 3, 4 days into the supply line shutting down, we're all in trouble. I think we all learned that when we went to the grocery store and didn't find certain things on the shelves. So there is a distribution and a storage warehousing element of Connecticut food. That's really ag policy, but I think it's a significant issue. And we're also working with UConn on this as well. So yes, it's sort of offline, but from the facility perspective, it's capital needs. We are running the buildings in a positive way. They are producing more income than they're taking. And we're putting that money into renovations. But a lot of it is just housekeeping.
And lastly, NHL, Hartford, Whalers,
Yeah.
viable.
I never get out of this building without answering about the Whalers. One thing we suggested in our recommended program for the XL is that we do nothing to forego that or some way make it difficult to pull it off should it ever come. We do know that the market is probably better than 6 or 7 or 8 existing NHL markets. But we also know that the building per se and an ownership structure are critical elements for them to never think twice. The building we can tackle, the ownership thing is going to have to come from somebody who's got the pockets in the state of Connecticut to run the facility.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those good questions. We have about 5 minutes remaining, and our last set of questions will come from Representative Meskers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is related to the convention center, the Excel field, and our ownership structure. So I'm a little confused or would like your thoughts, given the consolidation in much of the industry. Are we in the right business line with the state? Should the ownership remain as it stands now? I'm looking at making these facilities the most productive for our residents, the most active. And I'm not sure, when I hear about infrastructure, capital investments, et cetera, I'm not sure how well we're able to keep everything up to speed and how well we're able to monitor and maintain these facilities, given the demands on capital. So I'd like your thoughts, private or public, partnership or not, joining with any of the major national groups. I mean, should this be a standalone run by the state of Connecticut? I'm looking for guidance.
Yeah, I think each of the 3 buildings are different. Rensselaer is really an extension of the University of Connecticut campus. Most stadiums that are serviced by the universities directly or a public entity of some sort. As far as the college game, most of them are publicly owned buildings. And the stadium, we're sitting on campus, it'd be looked upon differently than it is today, sitting out in East Hartford. So I think that one's probably your true public building. The convention center, most often they run the same task as in the mall. If you went to the mall, the big magnet stores at either end, the anchor stores, are loss leaders. They drive business. The idea behind the convention center was to drive business into hotels, into restaurants, into downtown. And to a large extent, those are publicly owned and underwritten in some way, shape, or form by the hotel industry and the convention business. And in Hartford, that's primarily the Marriott. The XL Center is probably the one of the three that lends itself to a better public-private partnership than the other two. The arena business is a different animal. It relies on promoters of concerts. It relies on producers of family shows. It relies on sports games. They're all private enterprises for the most part, with the exception of the college game. And that is a ripe area to form a partnership and turn that facility over. The challenge with the XL Center that may be different than an MSG or other large building you might find in the Wells Fargo Center in Philly is that the building is so tired that the investment community is willing to invest in shows and ways to make money. They're not interested in investing in elevators and escalators and roofs. And that's kind of where we're at. So I think it's probably going to be some level of public investment in a private partnership structure that is XL's future. That may be the smart way to go with that building. It's a little bit different than the other two. And it's a matter of degree between the convention center and the civic center as to which one would be a better privately managed operation.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you much.
Thank you for your questions. Mike and Joe, I want to thank you both for being here. And I want to thank you for all the work that you do to support our capital city. We greatly appreciate your efforts. And if any member of this committee has any questions, they will certainly follow up with both of you. But thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, we are running right on schedule. I want to thank all of our members very much for keeping us on schedule. I also want to point out that Deputy Speaker Jerry Reyes has joined us. He is here today. And next we'll call the Department of Corrections when you have a moment. Thank you all for being here. And when you get settled, please feel free to introduce yourselves to our committee, and you may begin your presentation at your convenience.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Senator Moore, Senator Wong, Representative Napoli, Piscopo, and members of the bonding subcommittee. My name is Sharonda Carlos. I have the pleasure of serving as a Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Correction. With me today is our Director of Facilities Management and Engineering, Christopher Iwanek, and also the Director of Fiscal Services, Director Mickey Regan. I am pleased to come before you today to present our priorities for the governor's recommendations for our current unallocated balances and new bond authorizations. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you all today, and we will be happy to respond to any questions that you may have.
Did you want to go right into questions?
Yes.
Okay, great. Can you give an update on the Osborne Correction Institute renovations and where we are there?
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Iwanek. I'm the Director of Facilities and Management for the Department of Corrections. So right now we are in the process of the large windows and door project for Osborne. We currently had all the bids go out. The bids are due at the end of this month. So when the bids are due, we're hoping to start construction in summertime. A CMR, construction manager risk, has been attained for that project. So they are on board, and all the sub-projects have been bid at this point. So we're just waiting for the bids to be coming in.
That's great. How long do you think it'll take to have the renovation complete?
We're estimating once construction starts approximately 2 to 2.5 years. And that should be starting probably late summer, early fall.
Okay. Can you tell me how many facilities have we closed in the last 10 years or so?
In the last 10 years, offhand, we have the most recent Willard, Northern, Enfield, Webster, and Gates. So I believe 5 offhand.
And have any of those facilities been repurposed for any reason?
The only one would be, that my understanding is Webster. We use that building for our central transportation unit, some of our parole uses, for file storage and so forth. So that's really the only building at this point that's being revitalized and still used, but not for housing inmates.
Thanks so much for your responses.
Sure.
Any questions? Representative Veach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You said that one of the facilities is currently being repurposed. What's happening with the other 4?
It's a mixed use. We have some facilities that have been completely mothballed. As far as Rogowski, we've completely shut that off in compliance with the fire marshal. So that's not being used. It's not having any utilities purpose. That's also the case. We're going to be working to do forth with Northern and Enfield. Both those still have power, water and utilities, but we're in the process of completely mothballing those in compliance with the fire marshal and so forth. So those will have no more use at all as well.
So when you say mothballing, that means that's it? Will the buildings get demoed? There's no possible reuse or repurpose of them?
Right, there's no use once we shut it down as far as draining and everything. We haven't allocated any money for demolition, but that's something we're looking into right now. What it would cost to actually, but yeah, they would be completely shut down, not be able to be reoccupied.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Thank you,
There
Mr.
are
Chair.
various levels of mothballing. So there is where we pull back services to the point where if we needed to go in and use the facility, we could. All the way down to we're never going to be able to use this facility again because we've ripped everything out of it. It's just a shell.
Okay, one more question. What is the average size of one of these facilities, or do they range in square footage?
They range in square footage. Our largest facility
Would be Osborne, which is close to 1 million square feet.
Millions.
Yep, that's our largest facility in the state, and we have our smaller facilities that are around 200,000 square feet. So they do range different types of population from a dorm setting to a cell, inmate type selling. So each facility is unique in its design and how many houses.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your questions. Ranking Member Episcopal, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome. Thank you for coming, Deputy Commissioner. Appreciate it. I haven't met the commissioner yet. Is everything all right there?
Yes, Commissioner is well, and apologizes that he could not be here, but sent me as his representation today.
Oh, he had conflict?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. My question goes in your agency request, and I think maybe it looks like you have requested 336 million this year and 35 million in the out year. Oh wait. And 126 in the out year million. 336 million this year, 126 in the out year. And the governor's recommending 35 and 35 in both the years coming. Can you explain that?
Those figures are not our requests so much as they are our pipeline of projects. We have a 5-year capital plan, and that is the total. If you add those two together, that is the total amount of projects that we have identified right now. If you were to give us that amount of money, we couldn't do anything with it, right? We can only digest what we can digest. You know, when you do a construction, if you've ever had any renovations done in your home, you know what a disruption that can be. Especially you have a kitchen done. I mean, your whole world is turned upside down. Well, in a correctional facility, it's even worse because we have to maintain, safety and security. We have to maintain operations. So it's very disruptive. So we can only digest a certain amount every year. And the amount that the governor is proposing is what we can handle in a given 12-month period, roughly.
I understand. Thank you for the clarification. It's a 5-year plan looking out basically. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Wong.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And we're looking mostly in regards to infrastructure updates on this request. Now, I'm looking at other projects, referring back to page 45. You cited other projects include, are these additional funds incorporated into this bond request, or are they completed? So you have the replacing main corridor control panel, New Haven Correctional Center, air unit replacement, McDougal, fire alarm replacement at Gardner, and then new fiber optics to connect to the system at Gardner of $1.2 million. Emergency minor capital projects is needed $1 million. Are they completed, or are they ongoing project that was not cited in your summary presentation?
Senator, those are ongoing projects that just started. We've just received bond funds in the last few months on those projects. So those are projects that are currently in the works. Some are in the design phase, some of them are currently in construction.
And that's allocated bonding already.
Correct.
Okay. And is that reflected in your spreadsheet calculations?
Those are for the allocated funds.
For what
So
fiscal year?
for the past fiscal year that we just completed.
Okay. And just for my application, on page 44, you've got unallocated balance 1/1/23 of 22,341. But the agency request for fiscal year 24 is 336 million. Is that a typo? And
No.
if not, could you explain what the dollar amount
Yes.
doesn't seem to be proportional with any of the prior requests?
Those figures are what I mentioned before. That is our need, if you will, from our 5-year capital plan. It's not a request, it's what our pipeline looks like. So we have a capital plan that includes all of the projects that we've identified that we need to undertake at some point during that 5-year period. But as I mentioned, we can only digest so many projects a year. If you gave us $400 million, we couldn't do anything with it in a 12-month period because you can't take on that many construction projects. The amount that the governor has proposed in addition to what we have remaining in our unallocated bonds falls within that area of what we can handle during that 12-month construction period.
And I'm looking at the numbers, it seems to be such a disconnect from the dollar amounts you're requesting, even though it's a 5-year capital project and you're looking at back funding. I'm looking at governor's fiscal year 24, 35 million, fiscal year 25, 35 million. It seems to be a real disconnect in regards to your allocation. Are you saying that you need this 336, but you can only handle 35 each year to facilitate meeting your goals?
Yes. There's no way we could take on $400 million worth of construction projects within that period of time. But those are projects that are not projects, but those are construction projects that we've identified will have to be addressed. They don't all have to be addressed. They're not all emergencies where they need to be addressed right now, but we know that we're going to have to replace roofs. We know that we're going to have to do window replacements. We know we're going to have to do other envelope projects. We know that there are systems that are going to have to be replaced because they're coming up to their end cycle time. And so they get added to our 5-year plan. Now that plan, the items on the plan get jockeyed around based on, we thought that boiler was going to last for the next 4 years, but suddenly it's given us some issues and it needs to be replaced. But that being said, even though the need is there, and we know that over that 5-year period, we need to address some of these things. We know that some of them are going to get pushed out because other things are going to emerge. And we are limited by how many projects we can do within a year because of the disruption that occurs within a correctional facility when you do any kind of construction.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that clarification. It just seems to be your 5-year plan. Even if I added up these projects on a 5-year basis, it doesn't come up to 336. So, but you also note what we've seen in the recent trend, the closures of our prisons and the changing dynamic in regards to the number of those that we are incarcerating and developing new programs. Are you saying that 5-year capital program reflects the closure of the facilities that we talked about?
No, the 5-year capital plan is for all of our existing facilities. I don't know that you have a copy of our 5-year capital plan, and we can get you that.
Yeah, that would be very helpful
This,
to
the
understand your
information, the
rationale.
information included in the write-up that you have before you
Mhm.
is not all inclusive of everything that we have. We can give you that plan that has everything itemized.
Please, if you could, it would help explain a little bit the rationale for, I think, as you can understand where I'm coming from, looking at this sheet, you're looking at 336 million as an agency request for a 5-year plan, but on your year 1 and year 2 of that 5-year plan, you're only requesting 35. It seems like you have an awful lot of work in 2, 3, and
Well,
2.
that's $70 million plus another $22 million that we already have on hand in authorizations. That's a lot of money. We can only handle so much every year.
But it's 100 million more than what you're looking at.
Yes, but this only
So-
covers,
so
this only,
I'm looking to get the 5-year plan. That would
Yes.
explain a little bit better.
this covers 2 years. And the 5-year plan, 5 years, so we'll get you the plan. You'll see
Yep,
the stage of that.
And just as a follow-up, do these costs in your 5-year plan incorporate the closings that you have announced?
They wouldn't, if a facility is closed or being closed, there wouldn't be any capital expenditures being made on those facilities. So they would not be included in the 5-year plan. So for instance, we've closed Northern, there wouldn't be any capital expenditures associated with Northern going forward. So there would not be any Northern-based projects on there.
So thank you. And just from my observations, and I'm eager to look at the 5-year plan, it doesn't incorporate the facilities that you've closed. And we're looking still at that big of a number. Either we've been woefully way behind in infrastructure improvements of our prisons, or somewhere along the line, the calculations went awry and we're trying to catch up. But I'm eager to read the 5-year plan. And this is why we're kind of having this learning session here, and the numbers are interesting. So
Well,
I thank you.
I appreciate that. And I would just point to one thing, and that is our Osborne Windows and Doors project. That's a $70 million project just in and of itself. And that doesn't address all of the other regular ongoing replacement and services that have to happen in that facility. So, these are very expensive construction projects for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is the safety and security concerns. We have to have, there's overtime associated with these projects because you have to have extra security. There's movement issues within the facility for the construction workers that have to be taken into consideration. And these buildings are built to a different specification than other buildings that you may go into. They're prisons, they're hardened, and they're designed not to be easy to work on.
And I appreciate that. And that's why, for me, part of the rationale, the money's important in understanding it, but the other part is indeed, if there are needs to ensure a safety environment for the men and women who are working there and the men and women that are incarcerated there, why would we say we don't have the capacity and we're only allocating 35 million to do this project if there is a need related to safety and to ensure that not only the workers, but the prisoners that are incarcerated there have the safest environment? Why are we saying there's not enough capacity and we're only going to do $35 million of work? Shouldn't time be of the essence to get this project done in a timely basis, so there are no potential dangers to any of those bodies that we talk about?
Well,
Time should be of the essence.
Absolutely don't disagree with you 100% on the same page. It really comes down to, the bottlenecks associated with doing anything in a prison setting or a jail setting. I mean, there is a limit to what you can do unless you were to empty the facility out, take everybody out and move them someplace else, which we can't do. You have to work around those issues, and those create time and cost constraints.
If I may, Senator, and thank you so much, and we will make sure we get that 5-year plan to you. Please know that every decision that we're making and every ask has safety and security in mind pertaining to the staff that work within the correctional facilities and also the offender population. So we do not want you to think that any safety and security is being compromised by the ask. We just look to see what we can do within the time that's allotted, as mentioned, the 12-month plan. So we will look to, I hear what you're saying in regards to the gap or the difference with the ask and what we're receiving, and we'll look to make sure that if there's any follow-up questions after you review it, please reach out to us so we can answer those questions.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. And I want to thank you. I want to close by saying anything we can do to help the difficult tasks that you have to ensure safety for all the people you talked about. I am fully looking forward to working with you and facilitating you along with the commissioner. Thank you, madam. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. I would recognize the good Vice Chair of the Finance Committee, Representative Farr.
Thank you to the good chair of the subcommittee on bonding, Representative Napoli. Thank you all for being here. A couple questions for you. I know that the Osborne project was a part of this, but could you speak more broadly to the range of projects that you all see in the pipeline that are really about the energy efficiency of the buildings? That would be very helpful.
Sure. So represent one of the biggest projects we have on the pipeline. It's in the design phase and we're looking to hopefully go in construction this coming fiscal year, is a upgrade on our heating and cooling system for the whole entire Cheshire complex. That right now is estimated from the study that we received in initial designs at 25 million. So that in itself is a large project. That's caused huge disruptions over the last few years because the pipelines from the 1970s, every time we fail, the offender population loses heat or cooling depending on the season, as well as hot water. So that causes us big disruption, but not only just financially, but just in the operation of the facility. So that's one of the biggest projects that's in the pipeline. It's been in the design and study phase for over 2 years now, and we're hoping to break ground in the coming year. So that's gonna be a big ask, part of that 35 million. We've also have solar arrays that are gonna start going in this coming summer. That's been 2 years in the making. They're gonna be breaking ground in the next few months. And those are gonna be located at both in Summers, Enfield, as well as in Cheshire. We have 6 different studies that were done with our correctional facilities in Newtown, Uncasville, Bridgeport, New Haven, and one in Enfield. And those were energy studies that were done. Those were completed and we're working in collaboration with DEEP on those. And those go anywhere from water conservation savings to energy savings, basically identified anywhere where we were using, utilities. We are the largest user of utilities in the state out of all agencies. So anywhere we can try to save. So those are projects that are all in the pipeline as well and are in the works. So those are just a few. We have a lot more, but
Yeah, that's helpful. With the energy study findings, are those findings incorporated into the 5-year capital plan that you all have put forward, or are those proposed to be in addition to that?
it's a combination of both.
Okay.
Some of them are in conjunction here, some have already been funded. And some of them are being funded through DEEP in collaboration where we're working with them. So it's a mixed bag between all three ways.
Okay, that's very helpful. And then another question to you, kind of something that I didn't see in here was anything around technology that DOC might need moving forward. I know just technologically wise, there's been consideration of how to use body scanners as imminent, new technology around inmate search versus strip searches, and wanted to know if technology is in your future and if that would be a future bonding request.
There's potential for that. A lot of that falls on the equipment side. So that would be handled through the capital equipment process through OPM as opposed to our bond authorizations. The bond authorizations that we typically receive from the legislature are for bricks and mortar, the roofs, the walls, that and the mechanicals, not so much for technology or rolling stock machinery. But it is something that we're looking at, as you probably know. The adoption of technology in a correctional setting is difficult for a host of reasons, not the least of which is change. If nobody's getting hurt, we don't want to make a change, right? Mm-hmm. But we understand that that technology is critical, and there are some things that we're looking at that we may, be seeking funding for down the road, such as wiring our facilities for wireless to empower our correctional officers to use handheld devices that are secure, as well as using that for checkpoint sensors and additional cameras. And as you mentioned, there's a potential for using body scanners, and there's a few other areas that we're exploring, but we're still in the early stages of developing a technology plan.
That's helpful. And as you noted, there could be a range of technology improvements. It sounds like the DOC is looking at. So please keep us informed as you all look towards creating a priority list of those so that we can be mutually informed moving forward. So thanks for your answers to that. And thank you, the chair.
Thank you for your questions. Representative Veach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the second time here. I did have one question. Seeing as that we're experiencing such an increase in the cost of goods and services, if you can even get goods and or services, have you considered or took into account the increase in these changes, upgrades that you're planning in Osborne, et cetera, when you put these numbers together? I'm assuming you have.
Yes, Representative. So every project, we're estimating when the project will go into construction, and we were working with our estimators as well as the consultants. That's already calculated. If it's a 2-year project, 2 years out, they have an automatic standard industry 6, 7, 8% that they're tallying as part of those numbers that we're looking for.
So you're looking at roughly 6 or 7%. Is that the norm that you're?
Per year is
Sounds
roughly
low
what we,
to me.
on some of the
Just
stuff.
curious.
The last 2 years, they were carrying close to 12%.
Uh-huh.
So now they're saying that the market's slowly starting to level off. On the last meeting I had 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was 6-7% is what they're estimating on some of these projects.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for your questions. Any further questions? Deputy Commissioner Carlos, we thank you and your staff very much for being here. And we know these projects are very challenging. They're not normal traditional projects. You know, they have a certain set of challenges that you all have to surmount on many different levels. And when you send us the 5-year plan, I'm sure a lot of this will make more sense to us. And we look forward to getting that and certainly working with all of you going forward. So thanks again for being here. We really appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to thank the members of the subcommittee. We are going to hear from our last state agency. We are running right on schedule, so I want to thank you all very much for that. Next is the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. I believe they are joining us online. Welcome. We are happy you are with us. You may begin your presentation or perhaps introductions to the subcommittee.
Good afternoon, senators and representatives. I'm James Ravelli, the Commissioner of Emergency Services and Public Protection. With me today is Scott DeVico to my right here, the Executive Assistant. Clayton Northgrave is the Director in charge of Emergency Telecommunications. I'm Abe Fleur, the CFO. Deputy Commissioner Brenda Bergeron, in charge of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. And Willis Ballard, who's Director of Facilities. If you don't mind, I'd like to get going, if that's okay.
Oh, please proceed.
I'm all set for questions, sir.
Okay, we don't get that every day. So what types of projects do you expect to fund through the Buildings and Grounds program? You talk to us a little bit about that.
What you're going to see in the governor's recommended for the 2 years is there's an unallocated balance to begin with of 33 million. That will be drawn upon in a steady pace for our buildings. The governor's recommended a 3.5 in addition is mostly in anticipation for the building of some new state police troops, followed by 31 million the following year. And quite realistically, ladies and gentlemen, I have several troops, 4 troops that have been recommended not to place any more money into. And those are Troop B out in Canaan, Troop I in Bethany, Troop H in Hartford, and Troop D in Danielson. So we've already met with the architects for a cookie cutter, so to say, building plans for E, D, and I. H is kind of a unique situation since it's in a city atmosphere. So those are some of those alterations. Also, if you follow along, there's upgrades to the statewide monitoring notification system. There's 2 million that's unallocated. We just drew on 2 million to improve the information center here at the state police upstairs at this location. The other one that's more of a physical is the alterations and renovations and improvement to the EOC. So that's in there also, and that is to replace the HVAC system along with the sprinkler system and the computer room. The one that is more of a we should get going sooner than later is the EVOC Center, which is the Emergency Vehicle Operations course. That's utilized by both the state police and municipalities. Unfortunately, we were getting bounced out of Rensselaer Field with the sale to the private company. And we're currently trying to find a lease site to keep that operation running before we can find a permanent site. So those are more of the big operations we have going, sir.
No, that was a great response. Thank you for that. A program that is really, excuse me, important to a lot of us, especially me, is the demand for the school security funds, right? And how does that look like? I mean, what does that demand look like? And how have those funds been dispersed?
It's a huge demand. So you presently see that their school security has 5 million that's unallocated. That will, we request that one coming soon. There's presently 2 programs out there already, and the governor's recommended for 24 and 25, actually issue another 10 million for each time. So as we go a little deeper into your question, I'm going to introduce again Brenda Bergeron from Emergency Management. Her shop takes care of the notice of funding and the qualified persons that get, or municipalities that get that funding. Brenda, could you answer some of the questions about what we have in the bin now that are coming out and what you plan to do?
Yes, thank you very much for this question. This is very near and dear to our hearts as well. Since Public Act 13-3 was passed, we've put out about $88 million in school security funds. It's used for physical security at the schools. 10% of it is used for private schools and the rest is for public schools. It has been highly successful. We continue to get applications on a regular basis. The current round is round 6 for 2023. And that's, as the commissioner said, it's $10 million for regular school security. But starting last year, we also have money set aside per statute for multimedia school security, which is allowing schools to buy a system that allows them to connect directly from the school to law enforcement or to a dispatch center. That was 5 million last round, and for this round 6, it's 5 million as well. So it's been very, very successful. We work closely with the schools on a number of different initiatives, and the school security funding is just one of them. So thank you for that question.
Well, that's great. And are the school security projects, are they fully state funded?
Yes. Unless they get funding, they could get funding possibly from DAS Construction Services perhaps, or some other federal funding stream. And they do, I'm sorry, yes, and there's a cost share as well. That cost share is 50% match for private schools, and then it's a sliding scale based on the town's wealth index for public schools.
Okay. And then, so in my own district, I have a yeshiva school, and I am always worried about their safety and their security. How can they apply for these funds to make sure that their students and that their staffs are safe at all times?
Well, they can actually apply two different ways. If they're a nonprofit, they could apply through the nonprofit security grant program, which is also on your agenda for today, or they can apply as one of the private schools under the school security program.
There's also a third way. Can you explain the federal nonprofit, which doesn't show on here?
So just jumping to the nonprofit program, the state has been funding nonprofits, a nonprofit security program since 2021. But there's also been a federal nonprofit security program. So when a nonprofit applies for those, they are largely faith-based. So a yeshiva school would be very likely to be eligible for that. And then there's also the state program. So just to give you a sense of it, in 2021, we funded 112 nonprofits, of which 62 were faith-based. This year, we will be funding 126 projects at 114 organizations. And again, it tends to be a little bit heavier on the houses of worship than on other types of nonprofits. At the federal level, since in the 2019 to 2021 time period, we were able to fund 66 projects. And this past year, for FY 2022, there are 40 projects. We actually were awarded more than the baseline as a result of the good applications that people put in.
Thank you very much for that data. It's very helpful. My one last question is, in our security, in our nonprofit security grant, how much money is there for some of these faith-based schools to tap into?
Well, it's $5 million each time. It was $5 million last time. It's $5 million this time. And they fill out, basically they do a self-assessment of their threat vulnerability. And then that's put in and that's how they're determined. So they're eligible to apply for that 5 million.
Is there education before? Announcements and education before?
Yes, we actually, the last time that this was done, we did webinars and made sure that everybody had the ability to get on and listen to how the programs are run. And they're also, all the information is available on our state website as well.
Yeah, I want to thank you all as an agency for being so proactive with this issue. We really appreciate it. Next, I'll call on our co-chair, Senator Moore. Senator.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Long time no see.
I know, I haven't been down that way. I'm sorry.
Well, welcome. Glad to see you all for your staff. My co-chairs asked a lot of questions that I had regarding the nonprofit security funds. So there's an application process. If someone doesn't get funded in that round, and I think you said you're getting ready to do round 6, do they have to reapply, or are there applications sitting in the hopper waiting?
It's a reapply process, reapplication.
And so are they notified why they were not funded over other programs?
Yes, I think they get a notice that they were not awarded, and then they're given the opportunity to discuss it with the woman who's running the program, who's doing an outstanding job of that. And we've really tried to increase that communication over the last couple of years.
Is it because of their applications may not be stronger, or they need to be clarified, or documents missing?
It's probably not documents missing, because we're pretty good about following up on that, knowing that nonprofits are generally involved in some kind of social service, and documentation may not be their strongest point. But it could be that the threat assessment that they provided wasn't as strong as it could have been, or as strong as others. So we've actually worked with organizations to help them for the next round to be able to present the situations they're seeing, so that they can be more likely to get funding.
All right.
And Senator,
Thank you.
can I just add to that briefly? We allocate to those nonprofits that are more than others. So it just takes a while to get to those that are a little better off until we get to those that aren't as good. So.
And I would guess there is a demand for this.
Yes.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for keeping us all safe. I appreciate you all.
Nice to see you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Wong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for raising the two important questions I had. All of them are important relative to safety. But in regards to the criteria for the nonprofit, from a point of transparency, I know you've just kind of cited based upon a number of criteria that you just kind of, is there anything written down for individuals that are looking to make application to have a checklist of the criteria that you deemed as priority, one versus the other, urban versus suburban, religious versus non-religious? Are there any criteria set for a point of transparency for people making the application to know where they stand? Is it including threat assessments? Is there a checklist that you've transparently made available for people that are competing for these grants and applying?
Yes, a couple of things. First, most of the criteria are in the statute, which is in Title 29. So we do, on the nonprofit side, we rely heavily on the statutory language, but we also have a number of documents on our website, including frequently asked questions, what organizations are eligible, what activities are allowable, that kind of thing. So we do, and our staff person who's managing this is on the phone all the time with nonprofit organizations, helping them through the process as well. So there is considerable transparency on it.
Thank you. And if it's an ask of this of myself or the committee, is do you have a link for that application? That would be very much helpful. You also cited that it's a kind of a mix grant requests along with state and federal matching grant. How does that work? What are the percentages? And do the federal government have additional requirements beyond the ones that you'll be sharing with us?
So they do, their requirements are a little bit different. And the way that they proceed is slightly different. And we don't have as much information on how they make their determinations, honestly. But the reimbursement is for there is $150,000 cap per location with a maximum of $450,000 per organization. Whereas in the state level, it's a $50,000 cap. They fill out a self-assessment and they can get up to 50% upfront, and then they get the other 50% reimbursement upon completion. So ours is based on, it's in Connecticut General Statute 29-1BB, two small b's, and that really sets the stage for us. The way we handle it is they apply, if they've applied for the federal, we wait until we see whether or not they get the federal money. Depending if they're highly ranked as far as having significant threats, we wait and see who gets those federal ones, and then we're able to determine who's going to get the awards at the state level.
Senator, if I could add to that just briefly, the federal nonprofit, we're allotted a block of money, a cost share as it's compared to the rest of the states around the country. We always ask for more. In the last 2 years, we've been successful with getting more for Connecticut nonprofits. That may be just because other states are not as diligent, but we really try to get more than our share, which we've gotten in the last 2 years.
I appreciate that diligence and thank you. And these round of bonding looks at a new round of financing. When will the next round of applications be expected to be opened up?
So go ahead.
We'll give you an estimate, Senator, but just so everybody knows, Brenda's shop also does all the reimbursement for all the federal FEMA for the last 3 storms, along with all of COVID. We're really stretching them, but Brenda, if you want to.
So right now, we were allocated the $5 million in May, and that's gone out, and we will be notifying the successful. They've informally been notified that they're successful already, but they're going to get the formal paperwork at the end of March. Once we have a few months to get that in the hopper, then there is the additional 10 million that's waiting to be asked for. We'd like to try to do it in 5 million increments so that we can adequately provide the assistance to the nonprofits that are looking for it. So I would anticipate that after we've had an opportunity to get this program up and running, that's when we would ask for an additional 5 million to start the next round, which would be round 3 of the nonprofit.
Do you have an estimated timetable on that?
Well, if the 112 are going out, did I say it was 126 projects have to get started at the end of March, let's say, then I would think that by the fall, we would probably be putting out the next opportunity.
Great. And so 126 out of how many, if I may, that applied?
I don't have that number. I can get it for you though.
Okay. The follow-up question I had just on process is, let's just say there was 200 or 250. For those that did not meet the criteria this time, would they have to apply anew, or would they be put into the system with all the necessary information be reconsidered without an additional work?
My understanding is that we would have them apply again because circumstances may have changed. So they could have a situation where they were low down as a priority, but unfortunately things have happened that have resulted in them perhaps increasing their threat vulnerability. So we do, and we could also have organizations that have not filed before who have had significant threats in that time period. So we do anticipate that they'll file again. It's not a heavy lift on the paperwork side, but it's significant that we make sure we get those that are facing the greatest threats at the time.
No worries. I just wanted the point of clarification. You're right. They can use the same form, add the materials into it. But what I'm hearing is you would like the process to begin anew for those that do not meet the criteria right now. Would that be correct?
We would want everyone to apply again, and because to make sure it's fresh. And I did want to answer one of your other questions. I don't know exactly how many applied this year, but last year, just to give you a sense of it, of the 112 that were funded, that was out of 307 applicants. So we continue to see a significant interest in this opportunity.
And I know in a public forum that there are some security measures that we need to understand. Is there any way for the committee members that have an inquiry to be able to make a request to see who's been funded, and maybe for our legislators to see if their organizations in their district are funded? If they're not, they can approach the various nonprofits that may be eligible for it. Is there any way we can kind of not be redundant, or do you just prefer us to go check with our nonprofits?
I think you're best to check with them. We are very, very careful about that information. And we've had many requests from legislators that have a particular, for example, the yeshiva that was mentioned before by Representative Napoli. You give us that information and we can track it down for you one-on-one, but we like the organization to be involved in it. And then it's just a one-on-one conversation. We are very, very careful about protecting this information.
No, I appreciate that. And you would be the point person for those organizations to reach out to?
Either me or Scott DeVico, one or the other, and we'd be glad to work with you or the organization.
Thank you. And the last question related to schools, which are really important, is how much collaboration do you have with the DAS construction, school construction projects to ensure that the federal security compliance is met? Is there a lot of communications, and are you ensuring that the criteria and the requirements are met by school construction within DAS?
So that's a great question. We have a really robust school security overall program here at DESP. And it includes things like the school security standards and the plans. And we have a school security working group that meets and discusses those. With regard to the funding, the DAS school construction individuals sit on our school security working group. And when we are looking at school security projects, we do work with them to make sure that we are consistent with their requirements and also that they're not getting it from two different sources.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner, and my best regards to your men and women out there. Please be safe, and thank you for the great work that you do on behalf of the people of the state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Senator. Ranking Member Episcopal, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming and your presentation. I appreciate it. All my questions have been asked pretty much, so I'll go to a couple, if you will, smaller line items, and that's the State Emergency Operations Center in Hartford here. I see 2.5 million unallocated. and no action as either a request or a governor recommendation. Is there any comment you'd like to make on that?
Sure, Representative, there will be a request next time around for two projects. One is the heating and cooling system, and the second is for the removal of the sprinkler system in and around the computer area for more modern systems. So that will come very, very soon.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. And how about post the renovations and improvements to the grounds there, facilities, 1 million, again, unallocated. Any, is that deferred maintenance? Is it in need, or is there, can you enlighten me on that one?
The police officers in standard training area is in two different sides, Representative. First of all, it does come out of the 33 million that's unallocated at this time for improvements for buildings and grounds, and there are some projects that are reserved for them. But what you're pointing to is the $1 million specifically named for the training center. That one we've isolated. And we will try to break that one free soon. It is for the auditorium to make that into a more professional, collegiate kind of setting, a learning kind of setting. So that's what we've dedicated that money to.
Thank you again, Commissioner. And final question, it's the first bonding subcommittee I've attended where your rifle range, your gun range hasn't come up. Anything going there, or I'd be interested to find out how. I think we probably allocated some money for a study or an improvement to the existing one, but I can't remember.
So there is some money that's already been allocated that we had. That was, we are in the, we've just found an architect with a builder. So that is in the very, very early stages, and I couldn't even project what it would cost. We haven't even met with the architect and builder yet for a kickoff meeting, but we will be back for that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Looking forward to it. And thank all your staff. Good job. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Farrar, you have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being with us. Nice to see you all as a team around the table. I do have a question following up on the Connecticut Land Mobile Radio Network. Can you all just kind of share with us an update on this, considering the unallocated balance of 24 million?
Certainly, and I'll ask Clayton Northgraves after in 1 second. That was really came through as 39 million. Director Northgraves has already drawn on 15 million of that, mostly for the Department of Correction and their radio system. Clayton, do you want to get into some of the project for DOC? And I think we're putting up a tower with the other one, right?
Correct. Yep. So we did just recently request 15 million allocation, and most of that money, the bulk of it, is going to go to Department of Corrections. We've had numerous conversations with them, and they are happily going to transition off of their antiquated radio system onto our state-of-the-art radio system. So it's a great partnership between the two agencies. Just as a side note, we have almost every state agency coming onto this network now, which is fantastic. We are prioritizing Department of Corrections right now because their antiquated radio system is failing. And we want to make sure that their COs are protected. And so we're focusing on that aspect of this program right now. The reason for a little bit of the delay has been a lot of supply chain issues. We're trying to get quotes from our vendors. And as you can imagine, when we requested this bond allocation, it was before the dramatic increase in cost of living and products and services. So we're trying to work with that and manage the money the best we can. But we do have, as the commissioner indicated, we have a tower in the works in the Farmington Valley to improve coverage for some of our users out in that area. We're also going to put in some security enhancements based on a situation that we've seen in other states that are happening with radio systems. And I think the last one was, oh yes, we have one of our main tower structures in Rocky Hill. The structure is failing, so we've also allocated $2 million to rehab that structure. It does say replacement, but we've been working with the staff at that state facility, and the tower will need to be rehabbed and not replaced. And I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it does. So that 15 million, that's what you're requesting be allocated out of the 24. Is that accurate?
No, out of the 39, we're requesting the 15 million for now.
Okay.
Yeah, and Department of Corrections is our priority right now.
Okay. And then just kind of referencing certainly the overall intent of the network to just create greater interoperability. You mentioned that you're trying to kind of get coverage for every state agency. Do you all have a sense just in regards to the timeline of when that would actually occur?
So it's not just state agencies. We're also allowing municipalities and public safety entities on the network. We've got a number of federal agencies on the network. Pretty much anybody that's intertwined with first responders in this state. My hope is that we will have projects in the hopper to increase coverage statewide in the next 2 years.
Thank you for that. Thanks for clarifying. I am familiar with some of the municipalities, especially since in the past, as you know, there were bonding requests for municipalities to build up some of this infrastructure. And we certainly hope with the radio network infrastructure that you're building, those won't be as necessary. So that's very good to hear that you're hoping some of this gets full state coverage in the next 2 years. And again, I appreciate the clarification on some of these immediate requests and some of the challenges with the supply lines. So thank you all again, and thank you to the chair.
Thank you for those good questions. Representative Baumgartner, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, and to your team as well for being with us today. 2 questions. One, continuing the line of questioning from Representative Farrar. In Groton, actually both Groton and Stonington, if I'm not mistaken, were the 2 first municipalities to sign on to the state radio system. Is that correct?
That is correct. Stonington we talked to first, but Groton beat them to the punch. They got on the network first. And that's Groton Town. Groton City came after.
That's right. And I represent all 3 municipal police forces and actually served on the council when we voted to appropriated funds for this, you know, in large part because of that, you know, the efficiency and had Groton when we had a very outdated and antiquated radio system. And by hopping onto the state radio system, we were able to save our local taxpayers a significant amount of money as a result of those creating those efficiencies. So we're certainly appreciative of it. And I think from, again, an interoperability standpoint, the conversations I have with the respective police departments, I understand since they've hopped onto that system, communication even between those departments has been streamlined and improved significantly. At one point, not even the city or the town could communicate on the same radio frequencies, which is
that is correct. Yeah.
So we thank you for your continued partnership, and I just asked for since Groton and Stonington were got on board so early on, at some point systems do become kind of you know, old. You know, is there anything that municipalities should be mindful of when that we do sign on as far as future commitments outside of the what is already spelled out in those MOUs?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking that. So we actually require in the MOU that the town subscribe to what we refer to as SUA2. It's with the vendor, it's a service that's provided. And so these systems don't become out of date. They pay out of their operating budget now into this fund, and every 2 years, their infrastructure gets updated along with all of the state infrastructure. So any municipality or agency that builds infrastructure onto this network must adhere to that, and that's explicitly written in the MOU. And so that way, they don't go out of date. And we don't have those issues where the vendor comes to the municipality or even the state or a state agency and says, oh, guess what? Your equipment's sunsetted, you need to buy new equipment. We don't have those problems anymore because we subscribe to that service. And since we're such a large volume dealer with that vendor, we've negotiated pretty significant discounts, not only for ourselves, but for our municipal partners as well.
Excellent, thank you. And my final question, just reading the emergency vehicle operations course. If you can just provide a little bit more context and information on that. I asked that because on my first in the legislature, I remember conversation starting about a shooting range that proposed in Patchogue State Forest, and it elicited a lot of reaction from our northerly neighbors up in Griswold. And ultimately, the project was abandoned that project, and a lot of residents within that surrounding area, I think, were relieved. I read here that DESP is working with DAS and OPM in order to find a temporary and permanent solution going forward for this emergency vehicle operations course, including the possibility of repurposing existing state-owned land. And I've been reading a little bit about what's happening in Atlanta, specifically about how of a proposed site. And I just want to avoid a situation where maybe there, where we move forward with a plan that the local community will not be supportive of, especially in terms of utilizing what space that is forested and open space land for these purposes. I think there's a lot of folks in my neck of the woods, rural or urban or suburban, that may take issue with that. So maybe any lessons from that as far as kind of plans for this project and just a little bit more information.
So the information you have is pretty much up to date, Representative, on that one. So what you're referring to in Atlanta is a place they tell it as or nicknamed as Cop City, right? Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
All right, and that was a big complex for training police officers and around the area. That's not what this center would be for. This is strictly a driving center. There's strict requirements on how big it would be. And it's not going to be anything like what Atlanta proposed or started to build.
But you, Commissioner, you can assure that as these plans do come into fruition, that you will include the local communities that where this facility may be sited.
We can probably assure that, yes.
All right, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for those good questions. Commissioner Robella, thank you so much for you and your staff for certainly being here and answering all of our questions. Your responses were extremely informative. And on behalf of the committee, we thank you and your entire staff for all that you do to keep our state safe. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Representative. Everybody have a good day and be safe. Take care now. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, everybody. It is 4 o'clock, and that concludes our meetings with state agencies for the day. So I really want to thank all the members of this committee on both sides of the aisle, by the way, who have asked a lot of great and incisive questions and have really managed their time well. So everyone can certainly engage in the good discourse. I also want to thank our clerks who really are the people who make these meetings run nice and smooth. So we thank you for your efforts. Our next meeting is March 27th, 10 a.m. in this room, which is 2E. We look forward to seeing you all then. Kick it over to our co-chair, Senator Moore, for some closing remarks. Senator, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much. Representative Baumgarten, I just want to say, when we talk about access to food, I'd like to work with you on that. I think that's really important on some of that stuff. So I'd like to work with you. And I just want to say to all of us, we do such a great job. We're a great team. We ask great questions. We're tag teaming one another. Ron, Representative Napoli, you're doing a great job. And I thank you all. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, so we can't top that. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second? All right, all in favor? Thanks, everybody.